The SuperFlower ST4 ARGB is a brand new air CPU cooler made by the power supply manufacturer SuperFlower. This CPU cooler is a budget option into the overcrowded CPU cooler market, and today we shall see if it's worth its smallest price tag of just $35. The SuperFlower ST4 ARGB is a good-looking air CPU cooler that is made from the budget segment of the market. This is a single-tower air CPU cooler that uses a single 120mm ARGB fan for its intake, and that's about it for it functionality-wise. The design of this CPU cooler is simple, and we've seen a variation of this CPU cooler before, mind you. It's not that hard to make a single-tower air CPU cooler that looks good, but the ideas are running thin. There are some good features design-wise. Not only is the heatsink all black and has a nice coat of paint on it, but the top of the heatsink has a removable aluminum plate that has a dual purpose. First, it will reinforce the entire heatsink as it holds the cooling fins in place better than just the heat pipes. And second, the design of this metal plate is quite good and makes the CPU cooler look more expensive than it actually is. In terms of the pricing, this CPU cooler is affordable, with a price of no less than $35, which is not a lot for what you get, and what you get is a good looking CPU cooler that is also well made and has a good fan installed on it with a decent mounting system. And we start with the included fan, and this is a 120mm model which sports addressable RGB LEDs everywhere and rubberized corners to dampen the vibrations. The minimum speed of this fan is 800 RPM and a maximum speed of 1800 RPM, a speed range which is not uncommon, especially for 120mm fans. In terms of the power, this fan uses a single 4-pin Molex connector, and it is fully PWM compatible, thus you can control its speed via your motherboard or a dedicated fan controller or a fan hub. The RGB side of things is simple as well, with a single 3-pin addressable RGB controller that is compatible with any 3-pin RGB hubs or even your RGB header on the motherboard. The heatsink of the SuperFlower ST4 ARGB is simple in its design, with an all-black coat of paint on every single surface apart from the base plate. This heatsink uses 49 aluminum-made cooling fins to dissipate the heat from the heat pipes. These cooling fins are shaped to allow the fan clips to mount onto their sides. This way, a simple yet effective fan mounting system is created. In terms of fan support, this cooler can accommodate up to 120mm fans in a push-pull configuration. Speaking of the heatsink, we have to talk about the heat pipes, and this CPU cooler has 4 of them in total, all with the standard outer diameter of 6mm. These are arranged in the typical U-shape to go around the cooling fins and make as much contact with them as possible. What is different from other CPU coolers is the base plate. The SuperFlower ST4 ARGB has a direct touch base plate, which means that the heat pipes are integrated into the contact surface of the base plate. This is an older design which is cheaper to manufacture and not as good as transferring the heat of the CPU. This type of base plate is often considered inferior to a solid base plate, as the surfaces of this base plate is not as even as it could be. Thus, the contact with the CPU surface is not as good as with a solid base plate. In terms of the accessories, this CPU cooler does not have a lot included. You get a tube of thermal compound and the mounting system itself, and weirdly enough, no user manual, which is a bit disappointing. Speaking of the mounting system, this has been used before with other CPU coolers and it's a good one. It's nothing special and it requires no dedicated tools to use. It's pretty simple. You set the backplate to the correct CPU socket for your motherboard and then place the backplate onto the back of the motherboard. Then at the front you place the plastic spacers over the holes and the mounting bars in your desired orientation over the spacers. You secure the mounting bars with the included bolts, apply the thermal compound on the CPU surface and place the heatsink over the mounting bars, lining up the spring-loaded screws with the threaded studs on the mounting bars. You then place the fan on the heatsink and install the fan clips, and finally you connect the fan to a fan header and you're golden. And here is how the SuperFlower ST4 ARGB looks like inside a regular ATX system. The cooler is average in size and that can be a good thing, especially for clearances. Speaking of which, the clearances with this CPU cooler for the RAM modules is excellent, as the fan does not even reach the RAM slots, let alone interfere with them. However, when we talk about the graphics card clearance, things are decent to say the least, with 35mm of space between the sides of the heatsink and the top of the graphics cards, just enough space to service the main M.2 socket of the motherboard. Before we head into the testing of the CPU cooler, you will get to hear the sound it makes, with its fan from its lowest RPM going up to its maximum. I am doing this because while a decibel value is useful for comparison with other CPU coolers, it does not take into account other factors, such as the bearing noise from the fan or any vibrations that might occur. With a single 120mm fan spinning at a maximum of 1800 RPM, the SuperFlower ST4 ARGB reached a maximum noise output of 45 decibels, with the measuring device placed at the standard distance of 10 cm. This is not really surprising, as to get some decent cooling, the fan has to spin fast and deliver its air, which results in a higher than average noise output. The testing on all CPU coolers, unless otherwise stated, is done using an Intel i7 13700K CPU running at its factory turbo boost frequency. The ambient temperature is held at a constant 26 degrees Celsius, and each test is run 3 times to get an accurate average reading. With a CPU load of 150 watts, the SuperFlower ST4 ARGB reached a maximum temperature of 93 degrees Celsius, close to the thermal point, but not there yet. While it might look bad, this is not bad at all for such a small and cheap CPU cooler. Keep in mind that with a CPU such as the Intel i7 13700K, you need a large liquid CPU cooler to keep the temperatures in check. However, the limitations of the SuperFlower ST4 are obvious when we turn up the heat quite literally, and with a CPU load of 250 watts, the CPU ran into its thermal throttling point, as the SuperFlower ST4 cannot handle such a big heat load. Again, this is to be expected for such a CPU cooler and for such a price tag. Looking back, how is the SuperFlower ST4 ARGB as a CPU cooler? In all honesty, pretty good for what it can deliver and for what cost. At $35 it's not like you will be buying a heap of performance and quality. This is a small CPU cooler meant for small CPUs, and that's about it. It looks good and it will match any gaming system you might think of, but it has its limitation, as we've just seen. But there are some issues that need addressing. For starters, this CPU cooler does not have a user manual included in the package, nor can you find the user manual on the manufacturer's website. While the mounting system is simple and you don't need instructions to figure out the installation process, a user manual is mandatory for a CPU cooler, especially one that might be geared towards beginners. Another issue with the SuperFlower ST4 ARGB is the fact that it is not available in many locations, and even when it's available, not all retailers carry it. This will be addressed in time, of course, but so far this cooler can only be found in some select places and online retailers. If you have a mid-range CPU that needs cooling with a bit of style on the top, then this CPU cooler might do its job while being easy to install and easy on your wallet. However, if you want a high-performance CPU cooler for cheap, then this one is not for you, and at $35 you cannot really expect a lot of performance and good looks. So far, the SuperFlower ST4 ARGB is a good choice for a low to medium range CPU, and it can deliver a good performance if you set your expectations accordingly to the price tag. If you like this review, then you might consider subscribing for more, and if you want to support me in a direct way, then in the description below you will find the links for both the Patreon and the Subscriber Star pages of this channel.